The sea is a cruel master, nowhere more so than the waters around the Cape of Good Hope. Here, ships have been swallowed whole, sailors lost without a trace, and legends born from tragedy. Over 2,000 vessels have vanished in these treacherous waters. Some of their stories are stranger than fiction. But what made the Cape of Good Hope one of the deadliest places on Earth for sailors? For centuries, this southern tip of Africa was the crossroads of global ambition. When Portuguese explorers like Bartolomeu Dias and Vasco da Gama first rounded the Cape in the late 1400s, they opened a sea route to Asia. Spices, silk, gold, and porcelain flowed through this narrow passage. In 1488, Bartolomeu Dias fought his way past the southern tip of Africa and named the place Cabo das Tormentas, the Cape of Storms. King João II later rebranded it the Cape of Good Hope to sell the promise of a sea road to Asia, but the crews who actually faced those seas kept the darker name. The weather there could still smash a mast to kindling. In 1652, the Dutch East India Company built a supply station at Cape Town, anchoring the Cape's role in world trade. But that foothold also made it a target. In the late 1700s, as Britain and France clashed across the globe, the British seized the Cape from the Dutch. Twice. To Britain, the Cape wasn't just a pit stop. It was a key to global dominance. Whoever controlled it could monitor, disrupt, or protect the lifeline between Europe and Asia. The surrounding waters became not just treacherous, but strategic. Still, geography was the first threat. This is where the cold Atlantic Ocean slams into the warm, fast-moving Agulhas Current. The current rushes south along Africa's coast. It meets westerly winds that whip the waves into chaos. Sailors called them Cape Rollers, walls of water over 30 feet high, capable of splitting a ship in two. Fog banks roll in without warning. The coastline stretches nearly 500 miles, yet it offers only a few safe harbors. One mistake, and you're on the rocks. And when the storm comes on a moonless night, pitch black, the horizon disappears. All that's left is wind, water, and instinct. Navigation made things worse. Before the invention of the marine chronometer in the 18th century, longitude was mostly guesswork. Even skilled captains drifted hundreds of miles off course. Many ships ran aground in fog or darkness with no way to escape the pounding surf. Even after navigation improved, the Cape remained dangerous. Better charts and instruments helped, but they didn't stop the sea from turning deadly. In 1815, the British troop ship Arniston was heading home from Ceylon, loaded with wounded soldiers and their families. Without a working chronometer, the captain misjudged their position. A storm drove them onto the rocks. Only 6 of the 378 people aboard survived. The tragedy shocked Britain and led to mandatory chronometers on all British ships. In 1842, the convict ship Waterloo was anchored in Table Bay when a sudden storm hit and pushed it into the surf. The prisoners were still locked below deck. Panic broke out. Many drowned. There was no organized escape. The message was clear. If you can't reach the lifeboats, you don't stand a chance. Sailors talked. Officers remembered. 10 years later, that lesson became legend. In 1852, the HMS Birkenhead hit an uncharted rock near Gansby. It was carrying British troops and their families. Water poured in fast, and there weren't enough lifeboats. One stampede, and the women and children would be crushed. But the officers stayed calm. Hundreds of soldiers stood fast and let the families go first. Only 193 people made it out alive. The rest went down with the ship. That moment of discipline became known as the Birkenhead Drill, a code of honor summed up in 4 words: women and children first. It was passed down for generations. Even by the time the Titanic sailed, the idea spread beyond the Navy. Insurance companies began to rethink risk. Shipbuilders and captains started redesigning vessels so people could actually reach the lifeboats. and along the dangerous coastlines near the Cape, local towns formed volunteer rescue teams. By 1867, the Cape Point Rocket Brigade was launching ropes to wrecked ships and pulling survivors to shore with a canvas sling. It wasn't high-tech, but for those trapped at sea, a rope and a seat could mean the difference between life and death. In 1909, the passenger liner Waratah disappeared without a trace. More than 200 people were on board. She vanished between Durban and Cape Town. No distress call, no debris, no survivors. To this day, no wreck has ever been found. Some called it Australia's Titanic. Others whispered about curses. Either way, the loss cemented the Cape's fearsome reputation. A century later, the Waratah still taunts marine archaeologists. Each summer, sonar teams sweep the Agulhas Bank, mapping trenches where sand shifts like desert dunes. They've found cannons, Delftware, even the copper-clad hull of a Dutch Golden Age ship, but never the Waratah. Some believe she drifted nearly 190 miles before plunging into an abyss more than 13,000 feet deep, entombed beyond the reach of divers. But there's a darker part of the Cape's past, one often overlooked. In 1794, the Portuguese slave ship São José Paquete de Africa wrecked just offshore with over 500 enslaved people trapped below deck. More than half drowned. The survivors were not rescued. They were sold again. For centuries, the wreck lay hidden beneath the waves. Only recently did researchers identify it, confirming one of the first known slave shipwrecks ever discovered. The Cape wasn't just a crossroads of trade. It was a link in the global slave trade too, and the sea claimed lives no matter who they were. Then there are the legends, stories sailors whispered as they faced the Cape's fury. The most enduring is the Flying Dutchman. According to the tale, a Dutch captain, defiant and proud, tried to round the Cape during a violent storm. When his crew begged him to turn back, he swore he'd succeed, even if it took all eternity. The ship vanished into the mist, but sailors kept seeing her, a ghostly vessel with tattered sails and no crew, gliding through the storm. British naval officers reported sightings as late as the 20th century. Those who claimed to see the Flying Dutchman were believed to be cursed with misfortune. But long before that, Portuguese sailors believed the Cape was haunted by Adamastor, a sea demon born from ancient myth. He embodied the rage of the ocean itself, rising from the cliffs to curse those who dared pass. For them, the Cape wasn't just dangerous, it was alive, vengeful, and watching. Beyond storms and myths, human error played a role. Captains, pressured to deliver cargo fast, took reckless risks, hugging the coast, sailing into storms, or ignoring signs they should turn back. Overconfidence, exhaustion, poor planning. These were killers too. But every disaster taught a lesson. Slowly, shipbuilders, sailors, and coastal communities adapted. Ships got stronger, charts more accurate. Lighthouses rose along the cliffs, cutting through fog and warning of danger. Safety improved, not because the sea changed, but because people finally respected its power. Today, the Cape of Good Hope is no longer the graveyard it once was. Thanks to GPS, radar, and powerful engines, modern ships are better prepared. But the ocean still demands respect. Storms can blow up out of nowhere. Currents stay unpredictable. Stretching from Cape Point to Cape Agulhas, more than 40 shipwrecks now form what's known as the Shipwreck Trail. Divers glide past the rusted hull of the SS Lusitania, a passenger liner lost in 1911, while kayakers drift over the shallow remains of the Oosterland, a Dutch Indiaman that once carried 20 cannons. On land, signs mark the exact spots where ships went down, turning history into something you can touch. These wrecks attract everyone from maritime historians to curious travelers. And despite all our modern technology, the legends of these haunted waters continue to captivate the imagination. In the end, the Cape of Good Hope was more than just a stop on the way to Asia. It was a test of skill, timing, and judgment. What doomed so many sailors wasn't only the sea, but the lack of knowledge, the pressure to stay on schedule, and the unwillingness to turn back when it mattered most. That's what makes these stories so compelling, and sometimes so tragic. If you're fascinated by true stories of daring missions and dramatic history, hit subscribe and join me next time for another journey into the world's most dangerous places.